Hey guys, welcome to the last round, round 15 of the World Rapid Championship 2013. Following Mamedyarov's games, he's going to be white in this game against Ernesto Iniarkev, who is 2696, Russian Grandmaster. Just having a look at the standings prior to the last round. Obviously this kind of shows you the results, which is not optimal, but basically we had the situation that Mamedyarov was on 10.5. I guess also on 10.5 was Nepomniachtchi. So yeah, he was basically tied with him. So if he wanted to guarantee winning, he needed to win himself and have Nepomniachtchi not win. I'm not sure how the tie breaks would have worked. Maybe there would have been a playoff, or maybe it was something else, which I don't know. So pretty much to give himself the best chance, he wants to win. At the very least, he needs to draw, and I hope Nepomniachtchi doesn't do better than that. Okay, so he opens with d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, a6. Okay, so this is unusual, I'd say. I haven't really seen it. I guess it's a Queen's Gambit declined with some weird a6, basically. So he just takes bishop f4, knight f6, e3, simple development, bishop d6. Okay, queen f3, yeah, I understand that, because he wants to keep developing, and he doesn't particularly want to trade bishops here, because it allows the development of black's queen. The other option would be something like bishop g5, but we've already developed our bishop once, so we're kind of losing out on a move relative to how many moves black has made with his bishop. So, queen f3 I like, and c5 is played, okay. So, personally, I would just take this pawn, because it leaves an isolated pawn here. But we have to be very wary. I don't think we can take this pawn and take this pawn, because then we'd have the problem where queen a5 check comes in and we don't have really any defense for our king. So he takes c5, bishop takes c5, and now of course the queen defends this pawn again, so we can't take. Maybe rook d1 or something to put extra pressure on it. Maybe bishop e5 puts extra pressure on this knight, and also we can bring it back to d4 if we need to. But the problem with bishop e5 is maybe knight bd7, and it hits our bishop, and if we trade here we're not really doing too much to his pawn structure. And our bishop is immediately in attack, so maybe something like bishop g5 would be better, because then he can't, attack our bishop immediately without letting us damage his pawn structure. Also threatens to take on d5 again due to the pin. But I may just play something like bishop d3 or something, just because we want to develop our last remaining pieces. Maybe rook d1, I think I mentioned that before. Okay, bishop g5 was played. So it's kind of a riskier move, I'd say, but at the same time maybe you want to go down that route if you want your best possible chances of winning. Which, as we explained earlier, he kind of wants to do in this last round. It's knight bd7. Oh, long castles. Okay, I didn't see this for some reason. I was always expecting like rook d1. The reason I don't expect long castles is because the king is very open here. It's an open c-file. But at the same time he does get that extra pressure on d5, so he's bringing his rook to that file, and he's getting his king a bit safer, I'd say. So maybe it is the best move. And this actually looks pretty awkward to deal with for black. So we'll see what he can do. He can't really defend the pawn, apart from playing knight b6, and then we just trade everything on f6, and that's pretty much a winning endgame for white. So yeah. Queen a5 is played, so counterattack is the choice. It's probably the best one. If we take on d5 now, a2 falls also, so maybe we want to play something like king b1. in the future, but first I'd want to develop the rest of my pieces. Probably bishop d3, so we can drop it back down to b1, and also it covers the e4 square. Disadvantages of that would be that it blocks our attack in the d file, so maybe we want to develop the knight first, like knight e2 to d4 or f4, something like that. Knight e2 is played, just castles. Again, because a2 can fall, I don't imagine we're going to take here yet. It's very awkward for black to finish his development, because this knight is very important to use this f6 square, but it means this bishop can't be developed very quickly. Probably black is going to have to push some b5, bishop b7 kind of development that way. And we see knight d4 from white. So if he takes, we'll take back with the rook, and then I think we're doing much better than before, because there's one less piece in the attack, and we're more developed, and that kind of thing. There's this long-term edge against this isolated pawn. So I imagine black won't take on d4, and he'll just let it sit there for the moment. It's kind of dangerous though, because we have to worry about knight f5 and sacrifices on g7 or something in the future. Possibly in combination with h4, h5, h6, which can weaken that f6 square more. Bishop b4 is played, but now I think maybe knight b3, just push away the queen, is played. Queen c7. So yeah, it's kind of awkward to deal with this bishop takes c3 move, but at the same time we didn't really have anything better here, because a2 is still going to hang. It was one of the reasons I was considering the bishop move first, but yeah, here I think we pretty much have no choice but to try and trade the queens, which isn't bad for us, because if we get all the pieces off, this pawn is going to be an easier target, I think, because there'll be less counterplay. So maybe queen g3, maybe queen f4, just basically attacking the queen immediately. Bishop f4 I don't really like, because we get rid of the pin on the f knight, and that could allow easier development. So it's played, and black chooses to trade it. I guess his idea is that after the trade he can then take on c3 and the pawn's messed up. But yeah, he actually didn't really have any choice, because queen f4 also hits this bishop on b4. So that was clever by white. And here I would actually take with the bishop, even though I talked before about this f6 pawn, just because I want to keep my pawn structure very safe. Yeah, and I also want to keep this pawn kind of blocking this d pawn. So that's what happened. He does take on c3. Now knight e4. So he can take on d5, but then we have to worry about either knight takes c3 or knight takes f2. But at the same time we can't defend c3 and f2, and takes on f2 is going to fork our rooks, so I just take on d5, I think. Yeah, maybe... I guess there was no real way for us to prevent that after the takes c3, knight e4. So I think it's just kind of showing how easily weaknesses can form when you've got a kind of open king in the early game. Maybe that bishop d3 I played earlier was a safer option, but again, safe isn't necessarily what white was going for when he wants to win, so imbalances can be good as long as they're not putting us at a disadvantage somehow. So he does take on d5. I'd expect takes on f2 because it gives us an extra pawn island. Then we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 pawn islands against 2, with even material. So obviously in general that's better for black, but again his development is a bit behind. But knight f6 seems to solve it pretty quickly. So I think actually black's done pretty well so far. Takes an f2, rook g1 only move. Now knight f6, rook has to move. Bishop d7 is played. Bishop d7 is a bit weird. I'd have expected bishop e6, I guess. I guess knight c5 is the problem there. Or after king b2 to protect a2, then knight c5. But with this, I'd be a bit worried about just a bishop move to attack my knight, and of course this bishop is hanging if this knight goes, so bishop has to move, and then we can take on f6 and pawn structure's better. I guess the response is planned to be knight e4 after that, so that's black's way around that, I guess. In which case that makes bishop d7 good, because you can play bishop c6 next. Bishop e2, rook c8, attacking c3, king b2, rook e8, just centralizing, h3 to stop anything going to g4, h6, stop anything going to g5, also opens up air for the king, rook f1, knight e4, and c4. c3 was under attack. It's not a situation where you want to play, say, rook c1, because b5 would block out the c4 square, whereby it makes it hard to push c4 ourselves. Yeah. c4 is played immediately to prevent that kind of thing. And now knight g5 is played. Okay. So knight g5 looks kind of unusual to me. Because I think we can just take it, and then after 3 captures we can take on f6, and after 3 captures we can take on d7, and we're kind of gaining 2 pieces for a rook in that line, which is, you know, good for white usually. We will lose the e3 pawn as well, but just bishop f3 after that, and that kind of looks good for white to me. Again, this is the Rapid Championship, so I don't know how much time they had left. Possibly he missed that. I mean, the general idea with this is to bring it to e6 to fork these two, but yeah, it's awkward. Yeah. Okay, so it's taken, and it is taken here. Okay, so materially, black is up a pawn, but it's doubled. White's bishop's under attack. Depending on where he put that, c4 can fall. He puts on h5. So if c4 is taken now, if bishop takes check, which will win the rook. So this is actually a nice move. b5 is played. This pawn was under attack from the rook. And the other option is rook f8 just to defend this pawn, but that's really passive. And after it just takes on b7, I think white can just push this pawn. So I think this blunder back here with knight g5 is actually going to cost him the game, because either he has to get really passive and lose, or he has to go for a big counter-attack and try and make something happen. But after this b5, I think just c5 maybe, and we're going to have the same kind of thing. You could take on f7 first with check as well if you want. But probably you wouldn't, because double pawns don't offer too much of a threat, and also this bishop is currently covering e2, which is important. So c5 is played, a5, if the knight takes it, c5 falls, which is like white's passer, so it's important. Now bishop takes check, and bishop g6. From here, you know, it threatens rook f7 check to pick up the f6 pawn. It also can come back to c2 if needed, but that's kind of risky, because after something like check, bishop c2, a4, the knight would have to move, and after the knight moves, take c5, and then this bishop is pinned and hit by both rooks. That would be bad. So a4 is played, knight d4, takes c5, rook check. Okay, so here what white wants to do is basically set up some knight pins. So from here, obviously if we could play knight e6 we'd win this rook, but here this rook can take it. By playing this check first, if your king goes here, we have the rook check, and then once the king moves, we can take this rook, so we're winning a rook. So the rook has to go to this as the only square, and then after that we have knight f5 check, which picks up the rook, which is played. So black now has just a one pawn against white's knight, so it's looking really good for Mamedyarov here. Remember, if he wins this, as long as Nepomniachtchi hasn't won himself, he'll definitely win the tournament. So b4, rook d3, just playing super safe now. Rook e5, g4, good move because it pins these pawns from moving forwards, which prevents a lot of the counterplay. Rook e4, knight c2, rook e2, king c1. He's trying to get his king outside the pin and then take off these pawns and promote this one. This rook on the third rank kind of important to hold h3. f5, rook d6 check, king has to go back and then he's going to take this pawn. King f7, g takes f5, b3 now, so he's just going to trade that, and he's playing knight d4, hits the rook, hits the b3 pawn as well, so rook e3, yeah. Now knight c6, just kind of covering the squares, since he's going to use his rook and his knight together to promote this pawn, I think. King f8 is played, it goes back, f6, king f7, knight d8 check, king f8, f7, okay. Now rook f3, rook e6. Okay, so the idea now is going to be that next move we can play rook e8 check, and the king has to move to here. And although it looks like if we promote with a queen, the rook can just take it, then rook takes, king takes, and we've just got a knight and a pawn against two pawns, where black has really good drawing chances actually, because if he just gets some other pawn and just leaves white with this pawn, then it's going to be a draw, because this pawn and a king against just a king is always a draw. So you can just hide in the corner. Or we could have the situation whereby white's king is pulled back defending this pawn, and he can go and take this pawn without the knight being able to defend it, which would also be a draw, because just a king and knight can't make just a king. But the problem with that idea is that after black makes some moves and white checks, king here promotes, you play rook takes the queen, then you have knight e6 check, and that forks the rook and the king, so the king has to move, and then you're able to take the rook, and the knight on e6 also supports the rook takes rook, so he can't take your rook, so he has to take the knight here on e6, so you're left with a rook and a pawn against two pawns, which is obviously too much. Okay, and actually there's no more moves here, so black actually resigned here because of that, I guess. He couldn't really do anything else if he plays rook takes pawn, knight takes, again he's just got this rook and pawn against two pawns, and it's going to be too much. So that was that was the 15th round. Mamedyarov wins the tournament by half a point, as Nepomniachtchi just drew. And so yeah, he won, which is kind of the result which made me do this series. It's taken a while to come out, but I've got it all done now, and it's good actually. I've actually done a 15 game series. If I did it again though, I would probably only do games which involve openings that I play. I think that would be a better time use for me. And also, I try and pick a tournament where I can both see the times that they have left for each move to, learn why they might have made a blunder, or also to know the standings round by round, because here I just kind of had the end of table spreadsheet, which makes it hard to work backwards. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. So yeah, that was the World Rapid Championship 2013. Mamedyarov wins. And I'll see you guys with another chess commentary soon. See ya.